Personally, at the time, he was 23 years old. This dates back to October 5th of 2022. Pursley was behind on his rent by several months, according to prosecutors, when he was confronted by his landlord, 59-year-old Daniel Stein. Pursley shot and killed him. He has since been found guilty. And today is sentencing day. We're going to take you live into the courtroom again in Summit County. Remember, in the state of Ohio, because this is a crime in which there are victims, we could potentially hear from family members on what this has done to them. You see other family members, perhaps of Mr. Pursley, a woman smiling at him in the front row, but again, guilty of murder for the killing of his landlord back in October of 2022.
You're going to need to remove the courtroom. Do you not know how to do that? You go to participants.
The judge is explaining there are some individuals who are victim impact statements that may come via Zoom, or family members who are connecting to the courtroom via video, and they're just making sure they have all of the participants in the courtroom that have requested. While we wait for this proceeding to begin, they're getting some technical problems ironed out here. That right there is Eric Pursley. This occurred back on October 5th of 2022 at the residence that he was renting from a Daniel Stein, who was 59 years old at the time, in the 600 block of Sumner Street. This was a situation where Pursley was behind by several months on his rent, and prosecutors say that when Stein confronted Pursley about that back rent, he was shot and killed. We're sentencing today on charges of murder and felony assault. We'll see if those counts merge, if they just go after the murder charge, or if he'll be given time on both of those charges. And if they are run consecutively or concurrently, meaning at the same time, or does he have to serve the felony assault after, or the murder after the felony assault? You're looking at Judge Joy Oldfield in Summit County Court of Common Pleas. This was in Akron that it took place. Several of the properties in the area were owned by Stein, again, a landlord in that area. And when he confronted his tenant about several months of back rent, it was then that the confrontation started and the shooting.
But can she hear us? She's in the Judge Joy Zoom. She's not in. She needs to be in the correct meeting. I sent them a message to connect to the appropriate Zoom.
The judge here just making sure that any family that perhaps is out of town, could not make it to the courthouse.
I'm sorry for the delay.
Has a chance to join into this sentencing.
Watching, enter the Zoom, because it would be unruly. So they're in a separate meeting room. That way, if they're speaking, we can't hear them. It won't interrupt our proceedings. So unfortunately, that technology just takes a minute to switch over. As soon as our court reporter connects, we can begin. Can I have a sidebar?
Judge asking for a sidebar, microphones turned down for the time being. Judge meaning the judge wants to have a conversation with the attorneys, both the state. Again, a lot of smiles in the courtroom for a man who's about to be sentenced to murder flashing smiles perhaps to family members. We saw a woman in the front row giving him a smile. Not exactly sure what there is to be smiling about after being convicted for taking the life of a 59-year-old man and facing now several years in prison. We've seen this before in the court, laughing, smiling. If a judge catches hold of that, it may not be as funny to the defendant there, Eric Pursley. Again, lots of laughs and smiles for Mr. Pursley. Imagine what that feels like, being the family of Mr. Daniel Stein, also sitting in the courtroom, seeing him laugh and joke and smile with someone also in the courtroom on the family support side of things. Just a little tough to watch considering this is a murder case. We see some of the family members of Mr. Stein there in the front row, and then on the other side of the room, whoever Mr. Pursley is smiling and joking at with, sitting in the front row as well. Looks like the sidebar is over. Let's see if we are going to resume or actually begin this sentencing. Very interesting to see after the sidebar both the state having a conversation with some of the family members.
Here. Right. Thank you. She is. Marianne, if you can hear me, just type it into the group chat, please. Marianne. Thank you. For those of you, we're going to go on the record on State of Ohio versus Eric Pursley. This is case number 22-11-3952. Mr. Pursley is here in person for sentencing following his jury trial in which he was convicted of a number of different offenses. There are a number of individuals present by video viewing the proceedings. You need to remain muted at all times. You're not to comment outwardly. You're not interrupting our proceedings because we can't hear you, but you're interrupting everyone else who's trying to listen. So if you have any comments about the proceeding or concerns, you need to address those at a different time. I think that's been a concern in the past. But my understanding from the group chat is that everyone appearing by video is able to hear, and so we will proceed. We do have a number of victims in person as well. I have here on behalf of the State of Ohio, Attorney Elliot Kolkovich, Attorney Brian Stano. I have here Mr. Pursley in person with Attorney Pat Summers. I will hear from the State of Ohio on sentencing. Counsel for the state, make sure that every time you speak you're near a microphone and that the light is blue. Once the proceedings have begun, and they have, no one is permitted to enter or exit the courtroom, and no one's permitted to enter and exit until the court tells you when it's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. We were just in trial on this, I believe, about 10 days ago now. And just to speak first to the counts, the defendant was convicted of counts 2, 3, and 4. And the state's read of the sentencing will be that counts 3 and 4 will merge with count 2, and the sentence will be 15 years to life plus a 3-year firearm specification on count 2 for a total of 18 years to life. There are a couple people here to speak on the victim's behalf, so I'll keep my remarks brief, Your Honor. Thank you. Your Honor, we did just hear about this about 10 days ago. By all accounts, it was a warm October day, October 5th, which would have been, I believe, 8 days before Daniel Stein, the victim's birthday. It would have been 59. This is a trip he would have done several times, driving up from Cincinnati to check on his rental properties. Knocking on his tenant's doors is something he would have probably done hundreds of times. And he was able to do those hundreds of times without incident. No incident to report, nothing ever out of the ordinary happened. The reason I mention that is because the reason we're here today, the only reason we're here today, is because of the defendant's choice and the defendant's conduct, which makes that this killing is truly tragic and senseless. Your Honor, I would ask that you hear from the victim's sister, Deborah. I believe Sherman, a lifelong friend, is here as well, who's going to speak. Thank you.
Yes. Sir, when you come to the microphone, please state your name for the record and make sure you spell your last name. And make sure that microphone, Rachel, for him is blue. Thank you.
Good morning, Judge Oldfield.
Good morning.
My name is Sherman Couch, Couch.
Thank you, sir. What would you like to say?
I want to speak to the decades-long relationship that I and my family had with Daniel. I'll speak briefly to the nature of the relationship between how we grew beyond a personal relationship to a family relationship, and then I'll briefly talk about the loss that we experienced and how we're going to cope moving forward. I met Daniel in 1981. We lived in similar circumstances while we attended the University of Kentucky that were not different than the defendants' living circumstances. They were very similar. I knew Daniel. Our relationship survived several marriages of my own. We grew with my wife Amber. We grew a relationship with Debbie, his wife, and our children had dozens of occasions of being together in play groups and as young adults and teenagers to grow their relationships. And Daniel was always the center of that, the growth of those relationships. And those relationships are now disrupted by this murder. And the moving forward, we have to find a way to heal and put scar tissue on this loss, and that process is ongoing. And Deborah's asked me to precede her in her comments, and these are my comments. And thank you very much, Judge Oldfield.
Mr. Couch, thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here today. Sorry for why you're here.
Thank you.
Ma'am, you take your time. Can you please give me your first and last name for the record?
My name is Deborah Goldberg, Goldberg.
What would you like to say?
To your honor, your staff, your court, the prosecutors, and their office, thank you for allowing me to speak. On behalf of the man who was brutally murdered, Daniel Stein, my brother, I'd also like to express our gratitude of our family and friends for the multiple guilty verdicts, including murder, for some justice for Daniel Stein. I would like to read first what his middle son, Robert, wanted to say. I think the hardest part of writing a victim statement is admitting that you are too a victim. I have laid awake every night visualizing my dad's last moments. This is Robert in the picture, along with his Daniel's grandbaby.
Attorney Stano, if you want to, she can display that on the screen the way you did it in trial.
The look in his eyes when he knew his life and everyone he loved was fading away from his family. I don't know that this feeling will ever go away, and I'll carry this through the rest of my life. I could write a book of all the wonderful things my dad did in his lifetime for his family, friends, even people he didn't know. My dad was a man of second chances and always believed in the best of people, even those down on their luck. I'll leave you with one story. It was Thanksgiving, and we had a football game in Akron. He lived in the house where you murdered his father. And family drove to our college house for Thanksgiving. We had cooked a wonderful meal and an entire turkey. Everyone was full and ready to relax my dad asked me if I'd like to take a few full plates out to a homeless man he had seen off of Route 8 earlier that day. It was cold, I was tired, so tentative, but reluctantly I went. We packaged up the food and left in our car. I was a little embarrassed to be seen in the car, but my dad got out of the car and handed this man a meal in the bitter cold. This is the man that was taken from us. This is the man that the world lost. He always volunteered. He liked coming to Louisville with me, but that's gone too. My dad got out of the car, handed this man a simple act of kindness. And this is the man taken from us. This is the man the world lost. The world needs more men like my dad. This is who I strive to be, and this is how I will always remember him. A caring and loving son, brother, husband, father, new grandfather, father-in-law. But he was a grandfather to my little Lila, who was taken too soon. And he said, I love you. Let us go back to that morning of October 5th, 2022, and recap who you were then. Eric, personally, you were nothing but a thief and a liar and a common criminal. You can look at me like that, but you stole thousands of dollars from my brother and sister-in-law, Daniel and Debbie. You owed, at that point, 3 full months' rent yet again. You broke a legally binding contract of a lease, and you withheld rent, which is illegal. I can't get over this, for mice. This was all you're doing. We saw the body cam footage of your putrid apartment admitted into evidence. So I want to tell you what Daniel was doing there that day. He came as he usually did. Every month, he was doing his job. He gave you a service of housing, and you were to pay him. It's that simple. Unlike you, Daniel worked very hard, sometimes 1 job, sometimes 3 jobs, so that he and his wife, Debbie, could pay their bills, keep a roof over his wife, Debbie, and 3 sons, Stephen, Robert, and Jonathan. Whether it was when they were living in an apartment, they lived in an apartment, and he paid according to his lease, or he was living in a house and he paid according to the mortgage to the bank. That is what good people do. But on that day of October 5th, 2022, you chose to become a killer. Not just murder my brother Daniel, but you executed him. He wasn't looking at you. He was bent down. Did he drop his phone? Did he drop the tape to put the 3-day notice? We'll never know. And now, you are a convicted murderer. That's who you are. You murdered our future with Daniel and our future memories. I'm holding up these pictures because this is all we have left. There's no more dinners with his nieces and nephews. No more phone calls to his family. No anniversaries or future weddings with Daniel. No birthday celebrations or holidays. You murdered all the memories my nephew had with his friends in that house, with the blood of their murdered father. And you did this. This is your fate. You chose this. Not Daniel or his family or friends. You took his life and you took him from us. If and when the judge asks you to speak before you are sentenced, you or your family, do not apologize to us or to the court. Do not speak of any regret. As we heard you and your callous 911 call and your stone-cold killer testimony, you showed everyone on that day of the trial what a sociopathic murderer you are. There is nothing good you can say or anyone else. Nothing can undo what you did. These are all we have left. This is what you did. This is his family and friends. But you also murdered my past because he was that connection. The amount of years you need to be in prison should tantamount the number of years that Daniel lived. But I know from the prosecutors and from the state and laws that everybody else but you upholds, that is not what will happen. Because you see, he was so much more to us than just your landlord. He was a brother to me. He was a brother to my husband. He was a great uncle, a great father, a father-in-law, a husband, and a friend of Debbie for 40-something years. I see you looking over. But see, he had a grandchild that he loved. But it all will now be a blur.
Thank you. Anything else from the state of Ohio?
Rachel? No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Summers.
Judges, it's obviously a difficult case for everyone. Or sat through the trial and heard testimony. Eric Pursley's not been in trouble. He's tried to do things up until that date the right way. Lived with his family, his child, and his other child on the way in an apartment. He had a gun to protect his family. He got it legally. He took classes. He did everything he was supposed to do to own a gun. He's never been in criminal trouble. None of us, except Eric and Mr. Stein, were there that day to know what actually happened. The jury made their finding. And now Eric understands that he will face penalties for what happened that day. But I think this court heard from Mr. Pursley. You know his background. He has family, loving family. He has support. He's not been in trouble. He did not want that to happen that day. This was not a cold-blooded, wanton killing. He is remorseful. Every day I've spoken to him. I know he wishes to God that did not happen that day as it did. Family does not have to accept an apology. That's understood. Right now in their position, perhaps I might feel the same way. I don't know. But I will say on his behalf, and I say it without any hesitation or doubt, that Eric does feel remorse, that he is extremely sorry for what happened. And it's not just because what's going to happen to him. He's not a cold-blooded street murderer. It does affect him what happened. He does realize another family's lost a member. He's prepared to face consequences, Judge, that he knows he's going to face today. His mother is here, his grandfather. People are here to support him. He has two small children now who are going to be without a father for some years. There's no happy ending here. This is just a tragedy, Judge. I think everybody involved, they could go back that date and maybe go back an hour. Everything might have changed, done different, but we can't. What happened, happened, and everybody has to face the consequences. I've advised Eric not to speak about the case itself because we do plan on filing an appeal. I don't know at this point, given the family's position, whether his speaking and attempting to say he's sorry would just aggravate the situation, frankly, for the family. I could just tell you, I know he's remorseful and I know he's sorry. I know his family knows that. So I'm not sure really if his speaking is just going to make it worse. So I'll leave that up to him if he wants to try to talk, or given what they said, maybe he doesn't want to make it any worse on them than it is. I'll just say it for him. And I know he's remorseful and sorry for what happened. I know he wishes to God he could undo that day, Judge.
Thank you.
But we can't, and we're here to accept the consequences. Thank you.
Mr. Persley, you have the right to speak before I sentence you. You may stand and address the court if you choose to. You have to speak out loud if you're declining that.
I decline. I don't want to stand up and speak. I'm good.
Thank you. I'm going to have you stand to be sentenced, sir. My understanding is that the parties, by agreement of the parties and by operation of law, count 3 and 4, and the firearm specifications associated therewith will merge with count 2 and the firearm specification attached thereto. Attorney Kolkovich, Attorney Stano, that's true?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Attorney Summers?
I'm in agreement with that, Judge.
Thank you. You know, there's really not much to say to you, Mr. Persley. I don't believe in giving people a bunch of lectures when they're going to prison for life. There's really, you know, that is what it is. It's an unfortunate situation for you, and that's an understatement of the year. I will tell you, I don't accept your explanation about the way that things occurred. And I think it's unfortunate that you made the choice that you made. If you had time that day to ask your fiance to get your gun, and you had time to load your gun, then you had time to ask anyone to call 911 if you felt threatened. And that's the responsibility of a responsible gun owner, to make sure that that's the last resort before you take someone's life. By all accounts, including yours, you had never been in fear from Mr. Stein. He had, given you allowances for the rent. I realize that you believe you had some dispute about whether you had to pay rent, but there's a lawful way to withhold rent, and you weren't even doing it that way. And, you took from this family their dad and their brother and their grandpa, husband, friend. And that makes me sad for them. I will tell you, I'm equally sad for your family, because you've taken yourself from them, and you had an opportunity to be a father, and kids who grow up without fathers, it's a terrible situation for kids whose parents are in prison, and you've created that for them. I know you have had a supportive family. They've been here for you every day, and those consequences, I think, will be present for the rest of your life, and you know that. So for the factors that I'm required to consider, I do hereby sentence you on count 2, murder, to life in prison, with your first possibility for parole in 15 years. I do hereby sentence you on the firearm specification attached thereto to 3 years in prison. That is a mandatory prison term, and what that means is that you will serve every day of that sentence, certainly, and it will be served first and consecutive to your life sentence. So your first opportunity for parole will actually be in 18 years. And my understanding, sir, is that at the time that you are first eligible for parole, parole will then address whether you will be released. And certainly the victim will receive notification of that and have an opportunity to be heard. I'm not imposing court costs or fees. I don't think that Mr. Persley has the present or future ability to pay those, given that you will be remanded to the prison. Obviously, you're not, allowed to use drugs or alcohol. Those are unfortunately sometimes available in prison. I'm appropriately telling you that because that will certainly be considered at any time that you apply for release when you're eligible, and that's because they will consider your behavior while in the prison system. And you are legally entitled to jail time credit. It will be calculated as to your overall sentence, but not towards the mandatory 3-year firearm specification. And so that will begin, the mandatory time begins upon delivery to the prison. You have 30 days within which to appeal the court's decision. If you could not afford an attorney, the court would appoint one for you. Attorney Summers, you have indicated that Mr. Persley is considering an appeal. At this time, are you requesting that the court appoint counsel?
I would request you appoint him appellate counsel, Your Honor.
Then I'm appointing Attorney Alan Medvig for Mr. Persley's appellate counsel.
Thank you.
And that will be included in the journal entry, and he'll be given that information.
Thank you.
Anything further from the state?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Anything further from you, Attorney
No,
Summers?
ma'am.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to take a short recess. I'm going to ask that the victim's family be permitted to exit the courtroom on their own. Mr. Persley will remain in the courtroom. Mr. Persley will remain in the courtroom, deputies. If you're a member of Mr. Persley's family, you may also remain. Everyone else should exit the courtroom as well. And this matter is otherwise adjourned.
One final stare down from Deborah Goldberg, the
If you're here for
sister.
other matters in the court, we're taking a 5-minute recess, then I'm going to ask you to log into the Judge Joy Zoom, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
More smiles and I love yous from the family as Mr. Persley goes off to prison for.
Contact whatsoever, but Mr. Persley can remain at the table and say goodbye to his family since it is a significant sentence. I know I gave you that opportunity before, but I thought it was appropriate to do today too. We'll take 5 minutes. Thank you.
This is a move I've never seen before in my 20-something years of covering court. The judge allowing Mr. Persley to stay at the table and say goodbyes to family members as he is about to go off to prison. It looks like our photographer may have cut our feed here. We saw some I love yous as he was sentenced, as he was about to be taken off. But again, our camera has frozen here. Not sure if our photographer cut our feed, but again, an unprecedented move. I've never seen this, a judge allowing a person being sent off to prison for a lengthy period of time to be able to sit at the table and say goodbyes to family members. We're going to jump off this if we see this go to color bars. But bottom line, Eric Persley gets life in prison, first chance of parole at 18 years. It was 15 years for the murder sentence, parole at 15 years for murder sentence. But when you add in a firearm specification, that's 3 years. Those 3 years have to be served before anything else, so then it tacks on. It makes it actually 18 years. So life, 18 years is the first chance of parole. Some strong words towards Mr. Persley, which he just smiled and grinned. You even heard the sister Deborah Goldberg at one point say, "You can stare at me and look at me like that all you want." But she delivered her message, a very powerful message, saying that he is nothing but a liar, a thief, and now a murderer. We're going to wrap up our coverage. We had a reporter in the courtroom. There will be updates to this story and all of the day's breaking news when we have our 11 o'clock news just a half an hour away on CW 43, then our noon news on Channel 19. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News Now. Have a good afternoon.
19 News is everywhere. Download our CTV apps and follow us on social media